The Portuguese Empire absolutely slapped. They were the pioneers of the Age of Discovery, had the first global maritime empire, and their exploits set the stage for what historians call the modern age. When it comes to colonialism in the unique way that Europeans do it, the Portuguese were the OGs. Stuck on the edge of the Iberian Peninsula with Spain on one side and ocean to the other, Portugal had dreams of building an empire, and with Spain blocking its way into Europe, the Portuguese looked out into the ocean and dreamed. Y'all dreamed big. Let's go into the ocean. Maybe that's where our destiny lies, you said. It's not like you had a choice. Those damn Ottomans and Mamluks were blocking your way to Asia. These Islamic empires were huge, taxing the hell out of the Silk Route trade, making Eastern spices, peppers and goods far too expensive in Europe. The Turks and Arabs were getting filthy rich simply because of geography. Not fair. The Portuguese got so fed up with this that y'all just decided to invent a new type of ship, the Caravel. Fast ships that could sail against the wind. Innovation. To sail all the way around Africa and directly to Asia.
Come on, man.
Dedication. The Portuguese were master sailors. Henry the Navigator never sailed, but his boys mapped out Africa. Bartholomew Diaz sailed across the tip of Africa for the first time. Vasco da Gama found a sea route to India. Pedro Alvarez Cabral found a way to Brazil. I mean, y'all were cooking with the sea route discoveries. But it wasn't just you with the ships and the dreams. Your old neighbor Spain was trying to get in on the action too. But you guys were smart about it. In 1494, Portugal, Spain and the Pope met and decided to divide up the world. The Pope took a map, drew a line on it and said, "Everything east of this line is yours, Portugal, and everything west is yours, Spain." While Spain had to take a gamble on the undiscovered New World, the entire Old World would be yours. Good deal.
Damn good deal.
A few decades later, and now the Portuguese had outposts everywhere. Africa, Arabia, India, Malaysia, Indonesia, just about enough to access the markets in all these places, but never having to control too much that it became burdensome. Every important goods market in the early modern era, you guys were the first Europeans there. Every other European country had to buy from you. Pepper and nutmeg and cinnamon and all that was cool, but the best market that you cornered early on? Slaves from Africa. Now, you didn't invent slavery. I'm not gonna give you too much credit, okay? But you guys did make it into an industrial scale operation. Dedicated supply chains running from the interior of Africa to the ports. Slave factories to categorize and sort captives up before boarding them on ships. And shipping routes optimized for maximum turnover. It was efficient vertical integration. And the best part? It was all still legitimate business.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
Dollar, dollar. Dollar, dollar. Dollar, dollar. Dollar, dollar.
African kings would enslave their enemies and sell them to you for guns and rum. And you'd sell those slaves to the highest bidder. African kingdoms like the Dahomey, Ashanti and the Congo were rolling in cash from the slave business with Portugal.
I'm gonna come.
What did Portugal do with all these slaves they took? Remember how Spain got the New World, the Americas? Well, they had a problem. The people already living there weren't so happy about being colonized. Many of them resisted the Spanish imperial mission, and many more of them died because of old world diseases they had no immunity against. Because of this, the Spanish needed labor for their sugar, tobacco and coffee plantations. And it wasn't just the Spanish. Every European country was buying slaves for their plantations from Portugal. But you didn't sell off all the slaves you bought. You kept around 40% of them and brought them to a new place you colonized, Brazil in South America. Yes, while the Pope said that the lands of the West belonged to Spain, Pedro Alvarez Cabral pointed at the map, said, "This place is east of the line you said, so this is now Portugal's." Nice. You got a brand new country on a technicality. Now at first, you had the same problem as the Spanish in Central America. The natives of Brazil were dying just to the smell of Europeans. Yes, long sea voyages make you stinky, but it was probably the germs you brought.
Disgusting!
Probably. Anyway, the good news was, you had all the slave labor you needed. Everything seemed to be going so well. Spice monopoly? Check. Slave monopoly? Check. A king that doesn't get himself killed unnecessarily? Check. Oh, yeah. King Sebastião thought he'd play Crusader and invaded Morocco. Gets himself killed, succession crisis, yada yada yada. Spain steps in and says,
Congratulations. You are being rescued. Please do not resist.
In 1580, the Iberian Union is formed. Not a bad idea on paper. Two of the world's superpowers united into one ultra mega power. But this was the beginning of the end for you, Portugal. Because of this union, Spain's enemies became Portugal's enemies. That meant that from now on, the British, the French, and especially the Dutch had the perfect excuse to start going to war with you. Little by little, these new colonial powers chipped away at your empire. Even though you finally got independence by 1640, things were never the same. By the late 1700s, these new empires, the British, the French, and the Dutch, were experimenting with innovative industrial capitalist economics, while you were still fixated on plantation economics, still sending out expeditions to find gold in the jungle. Portugal couldn't keep up, technologically or militarily. So much so that when things got spicy in Europe, Portugal became dependent on British protection and the British Navy.
Lad, are you dumb? Are you getting rude to man? That's what you get, fam. Push you. Yeah, blood.
Case in point, in 1807, Napoleon invaded and the king fled the country.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
Hey, even with British intervention, I don't blame the guy. It's frickin' Napoleon. So the king fled to the only part of the empire doing any good for Portugal, Brazil. With that, Portugal essentially became an empire in exile. After Napoleon was gone, the Portuguese royalty headed back. But then Brazil was like, hold up, we're the big dogs now. Why do we need you anymore? Brazil gets independence in 1822 and Portugal lost their most valuable asset. Just like that. But not to fret, you still had colonies in Africa. Wait. New empires were scrambling for Africa in the 1880s. Remember, Africa, the continent that you colonized before it was cool. But now all the other cool empire kids were carving up Africa amongst themselves, and you barely kept on to whatever was left. Angola and Mozambique. When you proposed a corridor across Africa to connect Angola and Mozambique through Zambia, the Pink Map project, Britain said, nope, we have our own north-south corridor plan, so sorry, Portugal. It was called the British Ultimatum of 1890. Embarrassing. Embarrassment creates resentment. And that resentment was all it took for the monarchy to get overthrown by 1910. Congratulations, Portugal is now a republic. Republic perhaps, but only in name.
Since the end of the monarchy in 1910, there had been 44 changes of government, and the state was getting deeper and deeper into debt. On May 28, 1926, a military coup brought an end to the First Republic. Portugal was now a military dictatorship.
This dictatorship came to be known as the Estado Novo, new state, led by Antonio Salazar from the 1930s till the 1960s. Your last-ditch attempt to hold on to notions of empire. While the rest of the world and the United Nations especially were pushing for decolonization, Salazar said, wait, these places, they may look like colonies, they may be exploited like colonies, but I assure you, they aren't colonies.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
They're overseas territories.
Why are you gay?
Part of the sovereign territory of Portugal. I call it pluricontinentalism. Pluricontinentalism was a nice idea on paper for Portugal, but on the ground, momentum was swinging in favor of independence from your now weak empire. India, having just won independence from Britain, didn't want Portugal to stick around either, like you were in Goa and a few other places. Goa away, said India. Salazar expected that those pacifist Indians wouldn't put up much of a fight, but the Indians, well, let's just say that by 1961, their worldview had evolved.
No more Mr. Passive Resistance. He's out to kick some butt.
This is one bad mother you don't want to mess with. He's a one-man wrecking crew.
Bye, have a great time.
The African colonies of Angola, Mozambique and Guinea-Bissau had enough of Portugal too.
Do me a favor, please. Get out of here. Get out of here, man. Shit, I'm saying.
While other colonial powers realized the game was up, Portugal held firm. But the Africans were prepared to fight for independence, and they did. The legacy of the Portuguese colonial war can be seen on the flags of Angola and Mozambique. In 1970, Salazar was dead, but the dictatorship continued. However, the Portuguese colonial war meant that the dictatorship of the Estado Novo was getting bogged down in Africa, which made the regime deeply unpopular at home. So, in 1974, the Portuguese military, having had enough of fighting, and especially losing, in Africa, decided to overthrow the Estado Novo. This was called the Carnation Revolution, because the people joined in, handing each other and soldiers carnation flowers to celebrate the fall of the dictatorship. It's a bad look when your regime is overthrown by flowers. While some overseas territories remained, for all intents and purposes, the Portuguese colonial empire was effectively over. The game of colonialism had evolved, and Portugal had simply failed to adapt. Portugal was very important to history, that's undeniable. The pioneers of the age of discovery, the sea routes that you discovered are the foundation upon which today's entire global supply chain rests. However, you were beaten by other empires. You didn't adapt or industrialize quickly enough, eventually going from being the world's first global superpower to the poorest country in Western Europe. Still, the empire lasted for very long. You handed over Macau to China in 1999. Speaking of China,
我在北京。
what the Chinese are doing today is basically the same game that you started 500 years ago. Strategically placed ports and bases to build a global empire at minimum maintenance. As for cultural legacy, Brazil speaks Portuguese today. Angola, Mozambique and Guinea-Bissau still do too. Ultimately, if I had to put the Portuguese Empire on a tier list, it'd get a solid B tier from me. You slapped hard and long, Portugal. Rest in peace.